In this video, I'm going to share a brief update for you on some significant legal reforms that are being introduced in the UAE. My practice released a summary about these reforms to our mailing list during the week. If you would like to join our mailing list to keep up to date with relevant news and updates within our international practice areas, then drop me a line and I will be happy to have you added onto our list. Anyway, back to the topic of today's video. The UAE authorities have announced the introduction of a series of significant legal reforms as the country continues its push to become an international destination of choice and attract more visitors and expats to the country. The reforms cover areas such as alcohol consumption, cohabitation of unmarried couples, provisions around divorce and inheritance, suicide, protections for women, and some changes to the UAE's judicial procedure. The announcement was made on Saturday the 8th of November 2020 following the issuance of presidential decrees amending certain elements of the UAE's federal laws. The official text has not yet been published, however, the reforms are expected to take immediate effect. Following the announcement, certain inferences can be made on the changes that are being introduced. First, cohabitation for unmarried couples. The existing rules made it unlawful for unmarried couples to live together or cohabit. Although this was the general rule, it was very rarely enforced and in practice was and is widely prevalent amongst the expat population. The former general rule is now being done away with under the reforms, thereby removing the worry or anxiety some people might have had previously about living together or cohabiting in the UAE as an unmarried couple. This is now being formally recognised as legal and within the law. Next, alcohol consumption. Under the existing rules, technically non-Muslims required a license to purchase alcohol from a supermarket or store and to consume it within their homes. Certain licensed venues such as bars and hotels, of which there are plenty, have always been able to serve alcohol. Again, in practice, buying or consuming alcohol is not difficult to do in the country and has always been a popular activity amongst the non-Muslim expat population. The reforms will likely remove the previous requirements of a license and enable individuals over a certain age to purchase alcohol from a supermarket or store and consume it within their homes safely and responsibly. Again, removing any concerns some might have had about this before. In a way, the reforms are simply formalising some accepted pre-existing realities and practices on the ground. However, the formal amendments of the existing federal laws should help to clarify what the law is on these specific points and clear up any doubts, especially for those who might have been previously apprehensive about certain activities. Next, divorce and inheritance. It is expected that for divorcing couples, it will be possible to apply the laws of the country where the marriage took place. This may be beneficial for them if, for example, they did not want UAE law to apply to aspects of their divorce. Similarly, for inheritance and wills, it is expected that the laws of a deceased's home country can be applied and taken into account when it comes to administering their estate upon death. Where there is a written will, this may already include provisions on which succession laws are to apply to a deceased estate, and so it is expected that this can align with what is being introduced under the reforms. This should give further comfort to expats in the UAE where they might have previously been concerned about how their estate might be divided upon death. Whilst non-Muslim expats have enjoyed an ability to put a will in place at the DIFC, which is a reputable English common law jurisdiction within Dubai, Muslim expats have not been able to do this. As a result, the reforms on this specific point may be of particular interest to Muslim expats. Next, suicide. Under the existing rules, attempting suicide was technically a criminal offence. Again, it was rarely, if ever, enforced. The reforms are expected to decriminalise suicide and attempted suicide entirely, with a focus instead on treatment and rehabilitation. Next, on crime, a tougher stance is expected to be taken on those committing so-called honour crimes, especially where the victim is female. In addition, capital punishment is expected to be imposed for the rape of a minor or someone with limited mental capacity, with the aim being to put in place a strong deterrence. And finally, with regards to judicial procedure, it is expected that translators will be provided as a matter of course for non-Arabic speaking defendants and witnesses in court if required. In addition, it is expected that there will be enhanced privacy protections around evidence, witnesses and victims where a case involves indecent acts to help protect their privacy. Some concluding comments then on all of this. News of the announcement and the reforms that are being introduced has received considerable press coverage and has understandably drawn much attention, with many people lauding the changes as progressive and in line with the UAE's vision to position itself as a destination of choice. When the announcement about the reforms was made, the news featured as front page news in regional news outlets and was also prominently picked up by many Western news outlets too, grabbing their interest and being interpreted by them as significant changes on the ground in the UAE. As I touched on earlier, my take on this is that by formally legalising some of the already accepted pre-existing realities and practices on the ground, as well as introducing reforms on certain other areas, some of which will be of particular interest to expats living in the UAE, the reforms that have been announced should go some way in providing clarity on those specific points that they cover, and perhaps give some degree of comfort to certain people visiting or living in the UAE. Finally, it is important to note that the full extent and scope of the reforms will become clearer once the official text has been published. I hope you found this update informative. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time.